You're listening to Agile Ideas, the podcast, hosted by Fatima Abuchi. For anyone listening out there not having a good day, please know there is help out there. Hi everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Agile Ideas. I'm Fatima, CEO at Agile Management Office, Mental Health Ambassador, and your host. On today's episode, I'm very pleased to say we have Lenka Pincot, who's the Chief of Staff to the CEO at Project Management Institute, or PMI for short. Lenka brings global experience and a proven track record in setting and executing strategic vision, digital transformation leadership, culture shifts, and enhancing organizational agility. She's highly accomplished in the practices of stakeholder and customer relationship management, leadership by influencing and facilitation, problem solving, and building high-performing teams. Prior to joining PMI, Lenka held leadership roles focusing on organizational transformation, agile leadership, and relationship management. Most recently, Lenka served as the Head of Agile Transformation at the leading European bank, where she defined the organization's transformation vision and strategy, built a high-performing transformation team, and executed the roadmap while onboarding business and IT talent. Lenka promoted customer centricity, implemented citizen development practices, and contributed to their digital leadership in the market. Lenka holds a Master of Science in Computer Sciences from Charles University. She's earned a Digital Excellence Diploma from the IMD Business School of Switzerland and completed the European Women in Board C-Level program. She holds international certifications in project management, agile practices, and business analysis, including multiple PMI credentials. So please welcome Lenka to the show. Lenka, thank you for joining me on the podcast. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Pleasure, absolute pleasure. I know we've spoken before, but I thought with all the background and the things that you've done and your career and all the new and exciting things happening, I thought I'll have to get you on the podcast and we have to talk all things. So I wanted to kick off by addressing a big announcement that PMI made recently, which I think is pretty exciting. So obviously for those that are listening and are not aware, the PMI has acquired PMO Global Alliance. So I'm keen to just understand from your perspective, that's probably one of the biggest, correct me if I'm wrong, decisions made around the PMO space. Does that, in your opinion, now show that the PMO space in the globally is now evolving and actually getting more, I guess, airtime than maybe it did 10 years ago?
Yeah, I think so. I think so that there were a couple of reasons why we decided for this acquisition. And one of them was definitely the increasing importance of PMOs. We are studying and researching PMOs for already some time, and we see that, for instance, one of the elements which is very important for success of a PMO, Project Management Office, and then consequently for the projects which are delivered under this Project Management Office is, for instance, strategic positioning of the PMO in the organization. If you really make it to be a trusted advisor for C-level executives. And so for that, PMOs deserve more attention, more advocacy, more awareness, and this is what we would like to support by this acquisition. Then there were other reasons for that, and that is that we also look at potential career opportunities for more senior project managers, and becoming a PMO leader is definitely one of the career paths that you can choose. And so for us, this has two different meanings. First of all, we would like to support project professionals who are already part of our community in their professional growth this way. But then there is something else as well. So you also probably know that PMI co-creates a lot of content together with the community. Mm-hmm. And so having a community of experienced PMO leaders can greatly benefit other professionals who would like to take this career path and learn from them.
Mm-hmm. That's really interesting, and I'm glad that you say that, because obviously being in the know with all the research that you are doing and co-creating, you're obviously seeing and have a pulse on what's going on. I remember about 5 or 7 years ago, I was talking about like why is PMO not getting attention? Why are people not giving it the airtime that it needs? And I don't know if you saw this as well. We're going to talk about agility in a minute, but when the rise of Agile, particularly in Australia, we saw it about 5 years ago, came in, PMOs were being disbanded and dissolved. I remember speaking to some CIOs and they were saying, no, downsizing, don't need them, etc. But now I'm seeing that come back. Are you seeing much in the space of PMO and Agile? What are you seeing, I guess, from what you're hearing or seeing in your side of the world?
This is a very interesting question. It's a very good question. So just yesterday, I was talking at the annual conference of one of Project Management Institute chapters. So it was, by the way, it was my home chapter. It was in the Czech Republic. And they asked me to share the latest trends on the project management, the latest thought leadership research. So I did a little recap, and we were also looking back a couple of years. So when you look at the rising importance of digital technology and digital disruption, you see that the speed of changes is increasing. And what is also changing together with the speed of change is the number of projects that you need to have in organization. And I usually use that story. I started to work in 2001, which is like a long time ago. And I was working as a consultant and I was working for clients. And when we were kicking off a new project, it was a celebration. It was real celebration. There was like cake. There was a party because it was like, wow, we're launching a project. And then when we finished, we had another celebration because we finished the project. So doing a project was very special. And this completely changed over years. So then companies, because there was more pressure for changes, they needed to do more projects. And then later, especially with digitalization, we started to switch to continuous product development and using agile methods. And I think, so when you look past, 5 years or so, there was a big attention to agile, and I was like, wow, okay, now we can do things differently, and actually it's working. Because of course, when you need to continuously develop a product, you cannot do it by projects one after another because it's like continuous change. And so this led to concept, or let's say assumption, that projects are not that needed anymore. And this probably led to that underestimating or not giving enough attention to PMO, because PMO was originally designed to manage projects, not products. So myself, in my previous job, I was working on transforming of classical project management office into a team that was able to lead agile portfolio. So that was something different. But a lot of companies already learned from agile approaches. And I was just looking at one of the recent and not yet published research that we did globally this year. And we see that there is actually quite interesting rise of hybrid approaches. And hybrid approaches are now used even more than agile approaches, especially in some industries. And this is, again, very interesting. And I think this is also informing us why PMOs are getting, again, more and more important. Because modern PMO portfolio consists of several diverse types of initiatives. You have programs, you have projects, you have continuous development teams. And then you need a team who is able to navigate all of that, ensure that everything is supporting the strategy, that you can monitor objectives, that you can handle integration and collaboration between teams that are working essentially in different types of working, using different methods, using sometimes different tools. And you still need someone who is able to bring all of that together and talk to the executive level and show them how all these investments that you make into these initiatives are helping with your strategy. So at PMI, we even try to use a term, we try to call it XMO, because it's difficult. How do you call that? So it's not classical project management office anymore, because you have different types of working. Sometimes it's called value, VMO, like value management office. It can be agile portfolio office. It can be many different names, but overall it's about managing that portfolio of diverse initiatives and, trying to get the biggest value and support the strategic objectives.
It's a really good summary, and I think really interesting. You called out a few things. Like I know the XMO one was probably how we initially connected, because I was quite quite vocal about my thoughts on that space. But look, I understand the predicament, because when we think about it, and especially for sort of from my perspective, what I've been seeing in this space is, you're right. I am sort of yet to see an organisation at least in the last 7-8 years of running business that isn't actually hybrid already. I mean, almost every single one is now hybrid. Gone are the days where they're just following one standard methodology. And then when I think about what you described in terms of some of the feedback, we have heard, and I hear quite a lot, that we're putting a new streams model, or we're building a whatever, and we don't do projects anymore. But when you look under the covers, they still have time, they still have scope, and they still have cost. So they're still using fundamental project principles to drive initiatives, even if they are to develop products or whatever it might be. And then the last thing I wanted to sort of elaborate on that I think you mentioned was, when we think about all of the diverse, and you said it absolutely right, things that this function needs to do, it's still a management office of sorts. But I think the part that maybe people need to think about is it's not the what anymore, where you've probably seen the debate about what the P stands for many, many years, but it's about the how. And I think that's where the PMOs, whatever they call themselves in the new world, can actually evolve to really keep up with that and provide that executive insight. So it's fascinating to kind of see your perspective on that. So thank you for sharing that as well.
Yeah, if I may add to that, I often speak at different conferences, and I remember that change that was happening when Agile was, in that state of hype. Like it was like Agile is good and projects are bad. Yes. And then over years it evolved to, we need to have agility on the organizational level, and it started to be kind of like a no-brainer. And people started to understand that it's not, it still matters the way how you deliver your deliverables. Like you can do it different ways, and there are benefits of different approaches. But they started to understand that what is much more important, how you are actually able to connect that with strategy, and how you are able to see if it's helping you or not. And this is more difficult than, just to deliver well-defined piece of work this way or that way. Another big challenge where PMOs play absolutely crucial role is really how do you integrate these teams that work in different spaces. So, and I sometimes also share a thing that people probably don't know that much, that we as Project Management Institute, we have also PMO office. We call it EPMO, Enterprise Project Management Office. It's a team that is part of my group of Office of the CEO, and we deliver our own internal changes, initiatives, 50% with predictive, 50% with agile. So our own Project Management Institute EPMO has in fact program managers, project managers, and business analysts, and scrum masters, and agile coaches. So we are absolutely the same, like any other organization.
Hybrid. Yeah, absolutely hybrid. And see, that's a really good example of effectively trying. I don't know the analogy, but here we use the analogy eating your own dog food. I don't know where that came from, but it's basically practicing and trying these things, which makes you, I guess, more equipped to share insights as opposed to just being like a theory-driven body. So it's great to see that you're using that as well. Like I said, I've haven't seen any company that really is truly one methodology and that's it. I mean, they all have to adjust based on maturity and size and scale. So I do want to talk about one of the organizations one of the roles that you played at a really large European bank. You were the head of Agile Transformation. Correct me if I'm wrong, but when you took that role, was that a newly created role? So it was new for them at the time?
No. So my last role, it was a second attempt for Agile Transformation.
Okay. What went wrong in the first attempt? And the reason I'm curious is because that is a fairly new role, industry-wide, and usually it's because there are previous attempts that don't work. So could you sort of share what you saw wasn't working and I guess what you did to make it work, and just share a little bit about that? experience?
Yeah, so actually I spent a lot of time thinking about that. And especially after giving a little bit of time, I realized that actually nothing was wrong with the first attempt. And the reason why I say that is that it's really hard to do agile transformation. And it takes years because, again, teaching people how to use different ways of working is, of course, very important part of that. But it is much more about culture. Mm-hmm. It's a lot about culture change. And the culture change, again, it's not only behaviors. Like if you do not have certain maturity of digital tools, for instance, that you use internally for employees, it's very difficult to be digital on the outside. Sometimes we say you need to be digital inside and outside. This takes years to build it if you don't have that foundation at the moment when you already start that transformation, and you usually don't have that because you are usually not even aware that you would need it. Mm-hmm. So it's a combination of culture, organization structure, processes, technology. And when you just look at it from this perspective, it's obvious that it takes a lot of effort, a lot of time, and that it's sometimes even exhausting because it's many changes for people in a time. So even if there was predecessor and he achieved something, that was very important because he put things into emotion. Mm-hmm. And then he left, and then I came, but I wasn't starting on zero. I was starting from what he already created, what he already achieved. And I, of course, listened to people, and they told me, we like this and we did not like that. And I was mm-hmm. like, okay, like no problem. We're all learning. So let's try a little bit differently. Mm-hmm. And so I did my piece of work. I believe I again managed to move the company certain direction. I'm very proud of what I achieved. And then I changed my job and I joined Project Management Institute. And as far as I know, there is now another leader, and he's doing things again differently. Mm-hmm. And I believe that leading transformation, this is a discipline which is very complex. It requires to be open-minded. It requires to be ready to learn, to be very conscious, very aware of feedback that you receive, how people react to change. Sometimes you need to go faster. Sometimes you need to go slower because it's too much. And honestly, sometimes it's even good when you move it and then I'm sorry, I don't even know how to say that in English properly. Like you hand over, when you have
you hand the baton, like in a relay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, because you sometimes need a fresh perspective.
Yes.
Fresh perspective, because leading transformation is very consuming because you deal with so many issues. Mm-hmm. So it's good to take a step back and pass that baton to someone else, and that they have fresh energy and okay, let's continue moving.
What I love about what you said, and I know this bit that stood out for me, especially, which I think is so important just in PMO in general, and this is one of the things I always complain about, is that you actually took the time to see what your predecessor did, talk to people, find out what worked and what didn't work before then putting your flavor. And I wish more PMOs did that, because in my experience, I just see them come in and reinvent the wheel completely and ignoring and disregarding everything the person did before them, which is such a, it's the opposite of what being, flexible and agile is about. But I like the steps you outlined. So you said culture, structure, process, tech. Am I right in assuming that that was literally the order of which you focused your attention to start driving that agile transformation?
Well, I don't think so, because I don't think it's possible. Okay. Because these elements, they are connected. So you cannot isolate them. You cannot say, now I work on the structure, and once I'm done, then I go and change the processes, and then I change people's behavior, aka culture, and then I give them technology, or whatever other order you say. It's not possible. Because, for instance, once you start changing processes, you need to start to change the structure at the same time, and you need to give people tools so that they can operate differently, and then you also need to work on changing the behavior. And so for instance, in agile way of working, you know, of course, that it's a lot about empowerment. It's a lot about finding that balance between autonomy and ownership, responsibility. And for that, you need to have, we called it agile leadership. We even described all the disciplines and skill set for leaders to be able to apply agile leadership. And so none of these things is isolated. I always, sometimes when I coach people who want to take that transformation role, I always give them the same advice. Try to get familiar with a discipline which is called system thinking or business dynamics, and try to look at organization as a system. And then once you lead the transformation, then it's like, I don't know how to describe it, but imagine that you have like different pieces that are floating in the air, and you push one, then another one. And you essentially want to keep moving, and some of the pieces move sometimes a little bit faster, some of them a little bit slower. So you need to adjust the speed, you need to course correct, but you have different elements and they all need to move forward at a certain point of time, but it's not sequential.
Yeah, absolutely. Reminds me of that kid's toy I remember having when I was little, and has little squares, and you move the squares around, you can see the pictures underneath, but you can look at different pictures at different points. Some reminds me of, but for agile.
Yeah, something like that. And then on top of that, but it's also important to realize that, of course, that organization, that company, they do not stop operating just because of your transformation.
100%.
Right?
100%.
Never.
Absolutely.
So the normal life must go on. The company still wants to grow. The company still wants to have better operational performance. And at the same time, you are transforming. So it's really, it requires a lot of understanding how companies truly operate. What are the rules of that operation that you need to change? Because once you change them, they will drive other changes. So in the theory of systems, this is called leverage points. You need to find the leverage points, and then when you change these, then it will cascade like a domino other changes, whether in processes or in people's behavior.
It's really interesting you talked about the leadership side. One of the challenges I'm seeing, and I'm curious to get your thoughts on this, is I know when we think about just traditional project management, it shocks me how many board members or executives that are leading large teams or departments or divisions that don't understand fundamental project management, like basics. And then I think if you add agile, unless you're in the know, you've been working in it for a while like us, it is something that you have to get your head around to understand what exactly are my new ways of thinking and my new ways of working. So how do you address that with leaders who, time poor and we don't have enough time to give, and they think they know everything a lot of the time? So how would you address that, or how have you addressed that?
Yeah, so I will give you two examples. These two examples are from different companies. So one company I worked for, I was also, I believe, second or even third attempt for agile transformation. And so I joined the company and I had this feedback. We already know it's not working, but we already know everything. So you don't have to teach us anything. We know that it's working somehow, but not perfectly. And, so I was like, okay, so we are not going to learn anything. How about if we play? And so what we did, that we were playing a game that was very simple. It was, you were coloring Easter eggs.
Okay.
But of course, it was, this game was changed or designed in a way that, in fact, you were simulating a project or you were simulating working in iterations.
Okay.
But what was very important, that people literally on these workshops, they had crayons, they had scissors, they were manually coloring these eggs, and they were trying to achieve something. And it was very, very hands-on. And after, in the first round, we worked in certain way, and in the second round, I started to introduce them to iterations, a different way of working, and then we reflected on experience, helped them to fully understand what agile working was all about, not only in terms of technique, but also in terms of behavior in the team, what it really means, empowerment, what it really means that you need to communicate, provide feedback, etc., all these things. So this was one example how to overcome this. I already know that. So you try with hands-on exercise. And then different situation, a different company, it was not about we know that. It was the opposite. It was we do not really know, like we do not really understand that. So when we started to design our Agile Leadership Development Program, we used co-creation facilitation techniques. So we got together a group of people who were interested in designing this Agile Leadership Development Program, but they were not, their expertise, they were business people. So their expertise was not to design learning programs. They were normal people responsible for functions for businesses. So the question to them was, how would you like the leaders to behave? What kind of behaviors would you like to see so that you can then say, yes, we operate as an agile company? So we were brainstorming and they were just describing what they would like to see that is happening. Like this is what we want to be happening. And then we took all these inputs and translated them in 3 categories of competencies or behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
And then for each of these behaviors, we defined 3 particular specific behaviors. And it was not like, can you do something, but are you doing that? So for instance, it was also about goals or definition of objectives together with the team to support that empowerment and autonomy. So we were asking the leaders, we wanted to see if they are really co-creating their objectives together with team, like if they're really doing it. And that was for us one of the demonstration of leading people through empowerment and giving them more autonomy. So we had this model. We had a way how to assess, evaluate capabilities of our leaders who joined our pilot program. They all fill in this questionnaire or evaluation, and then we saw where we have biggest deficits in these behaviors that we wanted to have. And then it was easy because then we knew what we need to address. So then we designed the content for each of these 12 capabilities. And we just launched a program and we worked with a group of leaders to help them adopt new behaviors. So this approach, it took a bit of time, but because there was this very strong element of co-creation, there was a lot of buy-in because they created by themselves for themselves. Yes. It was not a theoretical exercise. It was really what kind of behavior of leaders you would like to have so that you can say we operate as agile company.
Yeah, absolutely. And by doing that in front of your peers, you're probably, some people might be a bit shy about it, but you're going to be a lot more open because, as you said, when you co-create, I find that the change sticks, but not enough people do it. I think some people come in and just assume that they know all the answers and try to push a particular path. And I think that's some of the challenges we're seeing in some of the transformations in, at least in our space, and some of the big banks here. They've just had sort of, really large consultancy come in and say, this is the way you do culture. This is the way you do the frameworks and process and all that sort of stuff, but it doesn't actually stick. So I'm kind of keen to understand then, how do you maintain or sustain that cultural shift once you've sort of helped develop it?
That's the trick, right? Because that's why I said that transformation you cannot manage sequentially, that you cannot first change organization and then a process. Because what you need to do that when you start working on change of behavior, for instance, leading more towards empowerment and autonomy, then you're changing people's behaviors, but then you also need to change some processes or some rules because they may be in direct contradiction with this new behavior. And then you need to catch that moment when there's opportunity to finish the change and transform it into a routine.
Yes.
This is very important for people because no one likes changes, but routines are good.
Yes.
So you just need to, stop calling it change and just really make it a new routine. This is, for instance, what I personally really like on agile way of working and methods, because at the beginning it looks new, but there are so many routines so that you get into that and you get in the rhythm, and then you don't see it as a change anymore. It's just really a new way of doing things. So in some areas, of course, this is easier. In some areas, it's more difficult. So I don't know, again, very easy example is to think about implementing of OKRs, objectives and key results method, which I believe is very important for organizational agility. And this method, again, when you try to implement it, it also comes with a routine, and that is some quarterly reviews of OKRs. And then when we were implementing this for the first time, of course, people were not sure how to use it. So you try to make it as simple as possible for them, to create that routine for them, which is as simple as that you give them a good template, you give them example, right? And then you give them feedback, and then you ask them, like, did it work well? Would you like to change something? So again, you make them part of that change. You give them that voice, so that if you did not like this, okay, so let's figure out, maybe we can do better. Okay, now we do it again. And the next time it's shorter time for preparation, and third time, fourth time, and it's a routine. And then you just don't call it a change anymore. It's not new method that we implemented. This is the way how we work. So working with words, stepping away from change, moving into routine is always very, very important. I guess this is then it's difficult when you have, for instance, external partners who are helping you, because people know that these external partners are here only temporarily. So as long as they are there, it's a change. Right? So if you have internal teams working on that, who sometimes it's easier for them to switch from change into routine and really help people to adopt the new behavior. And that's why, again, you need to think always about processes and tools, because you need to make it easy for people. If the change is difficult and takes a lot of effort, then unfortunately you have a bigger chance that people will not get into that routine, because simply it takes too much effort, to do that routine thing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good call, and I think it just goes back to some of the ways to positively influence that transformational effort, which it's definitely hard. It seems to me like transformation programs, 10 years ago were 2-3 years, traditionally run very waterfall approach, and then you get an outcome at the end. But it seems like now transformation is more persistent, using agile-based methods. That means we have to iteratively roll out change, and as you say, turn it into routines, which is a lot more easier, because it's like habits, routines and habits is something that's a really positive thing most of the time, and most people are happy to create new habits. So I like that example. Is there any other tips other than sort of the co-creation that you could give? So for someone who might be, one of the complaints we hear about some PMO leaders is they don't sit high enough in the hierarchy, or they don't have the opportunity to influence they want, but they want to go down that path and be able to positively influence. Is there any tips you can give some of the upcoming leaders?
Yeah, I can. I was just laughing because, I was just talking about that yesterday on the conference, and this is also a thing that I was discussing with my own internal EPMO.
Yes.
Because what we do with our EPMO, we do coaching or mentoring sessions, because I want to help them to be able to work with the executives. Because if you want to make it higher in your career, you need to understand how to talk, how to interact with people who are on that C-level. 100%. First of all, it helps you if you really want to get there. And sometimes it helps you to understand what is their job really about. And you may realize that, no, I don't want it.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is also a good thing to do. So what I was discussing with them recently is, when you want to have that voice and influence, try to put yourself in the shoes of your executive and try to understand first, what do they want to achieve, which is something different than what are we giving them. When I ask people this question, what do you think that executives want? They tell you data, they want information, and I'm saying, no, that's not what they want. This is what they need. That's not what they want. They want their companies to be successful. They want their companies to grow. They want their teams to be efficient. So when you start looking at that from this perspective, and then you are a PMO leader or program manager or project manager, then try to think, how can I help them? What kind of advice would I give them so that they can see my value in helping them?
Yes.
Right. So it's not always like bringing problems on the table or reporting if I'm, achieving my objectives and etc. Sometimes it's really about seeing that bigger picture and understanding business reasons behind the project objectives, and then telling them like, look, I can do this as it was designed originally, but I believe given the current circumstances or anything else, if we change the objectives, if we change the course, it will actually be better for the company, therefore for them, right? And so this is how you build your presence. This is how you will make your voice heard.
Yeah, absolutely. You're putting yourself in their shoes, which in this instance, they're your customer, like we would do when we're developing products or projects. We're putting ourselves in the customer's shoes. And I like how this links back to what you said at the beginning around, the place of PMO in particular is becoming more strategically important. I'm seeing a shift of what I know I used to do many years ago, PMO admin being sort of just that focus, but now being given the opportunity to have a seat at the table. Why? Because good PMOs have visibility of what projects are going on in an organization. They have visibility on how things are integrated across operations and business projects and strategy. And they have visibility of those things, and bringing that information, to your point, is exactly what is going to provide value for executives who are too busy and don't have time to get that information themselves. So yeah, I think that's a really good way of describing that for those upcoming leaders.
Yeah. I always say, like, just ask them, how can I help you? What would help you? It's a very simple question, and I sometimes people do ask me, but not that much. I think that they can ask more.
Yeah.
And also what is quite important to understand, that when you see that your executives are trying to achieve something, don't bring them only problems, like really try to bring them solutions.
Yeah.
This is what is very helpful.
Yeah.
This is what they actually appreciate. And then once you start thinking this way, then I believe it will lead you to understanding how to better communicate, how to better report, what to put on that status report. For me, what is always the hardest question, which I don't like to answer, is, okay, tell me what you want.
Yes.
And I'm like,
yes. And sometimes you don't know. You don't know.
I need you. I'm always like, you are the expert. I need you to help me understand that. Like,
yes,
what I want is like simple, what I want at the end.
absolutely.
But this is not the question, right? The question is like, tell me, what am I supposed to do? And I'm like, let's figure it out together, or give me your advice. Let's work on that together. It will be much better than me trying to figure out when I'm not the expert in that area.
Yeah. Absolutely. And it gives me, I was giggling because I was thinking about some recent customers, one in particular who's, a mid-sized business that's scaling. So your project management is more new to them, even though they've probably been doing projects the whole last decade of their business. But one of the things that was really obvious is the managing director didn't have one single source of the truth, whether it's an Excel spreadsheet or a software, of all the projects that we're running in an organization. So we did some exercises to try to find that. And when we ended up finding, two things happened. One, we found that they were running 96 projects. Now, for a company whose portfolio size is less than $5 million, that was a lot of projects. And then what was more interesting is when we presented this information to the executive, there was a project on there. She had a leadership team that were all in the room together. And there was a project that had a unique name, and nobody in the room, including the managing director, knew what that project was. And that information meant that they were then able to go figure out what it was and actually stop the project, because it was not supposed to be happening. So these are the sorts of things that we as, PMO leaders can actually do to provide value for executives. So I just thought that would be a funny story to share. I want to touch on, just to sort of quickly on you back to your ePMO, and how you've sort of brought in the predictive and agile environment. So you mentioned you have lots of different resources, Scrum Masters, and then you've got traditional. Do you have a basically two-pronged approach in that function, or is everybody sort of working in sync but using different skills at different times? Like, what is the way you've successfully integrated those approaches into your ePMO?
So I have to say, I cannot take credit for that, because that person who actually successfully integrated these approaches is our director of ePMO. So she's the one. And the way how she did that is that she always kept, and she keeps still, project managers and scrum masters or agile coaches together as one team. And also she's always very supportive of education and professional development. So sometimes from time to time I ask her, because I like to show that at PMI, at our own executive meetings, the list of certifications or education courses that they have, because it's impressive. They are very educated, all of them. So they are very educated in different ways of working. This is essential, because then it's helping them to cooperate, because they understand how the other person is working on this particular initiative, like what is their way of working and it is my way of working, and how we can meet each other. Then, of course, we have processes and governance in place. So we do PI planning and all, I would call it like a normal stuff to coordinate. We keep track of initiatives. We keep track of, we have a way, how do we report the status in very concise way, really focused on what is the objective, what we're delivering. And then another very important part of successful integration of different ways of working under one EPMO is culture. And that is that it really, that imperative of being open, being flexible, always ready to learn. And we support this culture. I would say we, but again, it's my director, it's her. So, for instance, the team, they self-organize themselves to have sessions which they call lunch and learn. So every month they meet all together and they learn something from each other. So this culture of learning, openness, flexibility, and then on the back end, that education, so that when it's needed, you can transition people from one function, even if it's just temporary, just to help you out. So that people do understand each other better. This is helping for that integration, because we have processes and we have dashboards and stuff, but after all, that real integration happens on people level. It's like how people cooperate, how they collaborate, how do they understand each other. This is where this real integration is happening.
Yeah, absolutely. That's it, really interesting. And what I was thinking as you were just saying that is, not only are you doing it in your team, but by practically applying these different ways of working, it does then mean naturally projects that are running in your organization, whether they come from an agile background, whether they come from a traditional background, your team is able to support them whichever direction they want to take. So you're not prescribing for them how they have to do projects. You're allowing the people to bring their own skills to the table. So is that fair to say?
Yeah. We were just discussing that, for instance, we have one initiative that was managed originally as a project because it required a lot of resources and a lot of focus and a lot of, let's say, like a cadence at the beginning to keep it moving. And now we're saying, okay, and now we transfer it to one of our continuous development team that we have, because now it's more about continuous development, but it's not about building anymore. For us, this is very natural way to do.
Absolutely. That makes sense. And it's really interesting to see, as I said, we said at the very beginning, that PMI are making that shift internally, which I guess puts you in a better position to be able to then inform some of those best practices as well. So that's really exciting. So before we wrap up, I'm kind of keen to just understand what's on the horizon. Is there any other exciting news you can share about what's going on in the PMI landscape, and what are you most excited about? I guess in your role as Chief of Staff.
Well, personally, I'm always very excited about innovation.
100%.
That's kind of like my passion. And so in my role as Chief of Staff, I'm also head of Office of the CEO. So that is a group of 5 different teams. So one of them is EPMO, as we just talked about that. And the other team is our thought leadership team. And here I am very excited, because that's the team that does that research and creates the reports and basically informs the community about these new trends and where we are heading. Right now, of course, at PMI, we are pretty much focused on impact of artificial intelligence on project management professions. So You see probably that we produced a couple of reports recently, and we also have now really exciting thing. It's a tool called Infinity. It's in MVP stage. Again, you hear MVP.
Yes.
It's a tool. It's like an assistant for project managers. It's the use of technology. So we are right now testing it with our volunteers and exploring the technology. And the reason why we do that is, again, very straightforward. It's exactly like you said it a few minutes ago. So if we, as Project Management Institute, want to give advice, credible advice, how is this technology impacting project management profession, then we have to, how did you say that? Eat the dog food?
Yeah, eat your own dog food. Yep.
Yeah. So this is exactly what we're doing. So we are running internal initiative that we call PMI by AI. It consists of a couple of different things. It's developing learning content, developing some leadership, and also developing that tool so that we can play with that, we can test it, we can develop it. We inviting our volunteers to also test it, help us to develop, and we will see where it goes.
Amazing. And it's obviously very timely because everybody's talking about AI at the moment. And I think everyone is starting to get, either they completely on board and really trying to educate themselves on it, or there's quite a few skeptics out there that my husband always says to me, AI is going to take your job. And I was like, my job's all about stakeholder communication and people. And I don't think that's ever going to be replaced by AI. So we'll watch and see if he's right. But no, that's really interesting. I'll definitely be keen to looking at that Infinity tool. We are now almost at the end. Before we wrap up today, is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners, a call to action, a piece of advice, or a question to ponder today?
So I would say, first of all, of course, read our thought leadership reports, because we introduced innovation layer to the thought leadership reports somewhere during the summer this year. And we really try to focus on practical advice for practitioners. We call this layer individual career, then state of the profession, so where the profession is going, and then this innovation. So this is informing about future trends and how to get ready for that. And then how to use all of that. And here I would say my favorite advice, it's like everyone always has a choice to decide and define what you do. And I know that this is sometimes hard because you feel like, no, I don't have a choice. Like my boss is telling me what am I supposed to do? And then I think like, no, you have a choice, because you can start talking with your boss. But for that, you need to learn what is important for them so that you give them credible advice, so that you really give them advice that is relevant. Or another thing, if we always talk a lot also about impact of projects, and there are two trends which are impacting the profession right now. So one of that is that digital disruption that we talked about almost this whole evening. Then another very important trend is climate change. And again, I would just say, like, be clear on what you want, and once you know it, just go for it.
Amazing. And keep yourself educated through thought leadership content.
Yeah, well. Of course. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Lenka, for joining me. It's been a pleasure. I'm sure we could have spoken for hours, but we don't have hours, unfortunately. So thank you so much for being part of the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you for your invitation.
Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. Please share this with someone or rate it if you enjoyed it. Don't forget to follow us on social media, and to stay up to date with all things Agile Ideas, go to our website www.agilemanagementoffice.com. I hope you've been able to learn, feel, or be inspired today. Until next time, what's your Agile idea?